welcome everyone to the Legendarium Green Team. We're back. The usual crew, end of the year, sci-fi and fantasy, debatable, movies podcast. And with me today, my faithful sidekick Jingalls.
Hola.
And our returning guest from the Cinema in Seconds podcast, Ian.
Yellow.
All right, boys. It's been a tough, grueling year. We saw a lot of garbage, but we're still standing. Let's start off with our overall thoughts on the year. I'll throw it to Jingles first, because I think you had some criticisms maybe of this year, as we all did. But what'd you think of it overall?
Yeah, that's what. There were a lot of movies this year, a lot more than I expected, given how much. I expected it to be kind of a slow year, just off of all of the stuff that was happening with SAG and slower, production year. I wish it was slower. There was a lot of sequel, a lot of reboot, a lot of just not very interesting stuff. That said,
Going down the gauntlet.
yeah. We got a reboot for The Crow this year, which was just atrocious. Sorry to call out The Crow, but just like felt like the well was really empty. I don't know.
I was talking with a friend about movies the other day, and he's like, "Yeah, and I'm looking forward to that Crow remake." And I'm like, "That came out like a couple months ago." He's like, "Really?" "Yeah, nobody's talking about it." He's like, "Oh, that's too bad."
Yeah, no, I feel the same way. I mean, you brought up a good point, is that like the strikes had just a huge impact. Right when everyone was the studios were recovering from COVID, the strike happened, and either studios didn't have time to make things, they pushed a lot to 2025. That's why their motto, quote unquote, is survive till 25, like all the theater chains, because there's so much coming out next year. But yeah, Ian, what about you? Was this a year to remember for you? I mean, it must have been. Your favorite movie of all time came out.
My favorite movie, what, Argyle? I will say that it was easier for me to come up with my bottom 10 movies of the year than it was my top 10 movies of the year this year. So
wow,
that's something.
Oh dang.
Yeah, it was, but that said, I mean, the top 10 that I did come up with, there's some pretty awesome stuff in there. But like, Jingles is right about the reboots and sequels. Like, I feel like we say that every year, that there's so many of them, but this year, I don't know, it seemed like a lot. I remember going through the upcoming movies at the beginning of the year, and I'm just being like, it's like part 2, part 3, part 4, interesting.
There were 3 Sony Spider-Man spin-off movies this year. Unbelievable. Like Kraven, Madame Web was this year.
Yeah, what was the third?
The third Venom.
Oh, that's right. I always forget that's part of those.
I mean, that's just a tough year all around when you're throwing all those out. Yeah, I felt similar. Like when I made my list, I just didn't have any like real like 5-star. I mean, not to arbitrarily bring up star ratings, but like a 5-star, 4.5 star, where like usually like I come out of the gate like I'm gonna love that movie for years. Like Across the Spider-Verse was last year, The Boy and the Heron, like those 2 last year, like being at the top, I'm like, that's like anything below that, I don't care. Like having those round out my list, I feel great about like as a year. Godzilla -1, I think, was last year, where it's like, oh, we're eating good. And I didn't have any of them. I didn't have bad, but it was all kind of like, yeah, that was good. It was good. Like I think all of mine were like solid 4 stars. Like I enjoyed these, and but it's not like a memorable kind of like, oh, that's the year that like Across the Spider-Verse came out, or something like that.
Yeah, and I kind of say this with no real evidence, but I feel like this year was kind of the return of the mid-budget film. Like there was just a lot of stuff that it's not going to cost $200 million to make it, and some of it stood out. I think we have a good list of some of that stuff here, but most of it was just so mediocre, and just like, yeah, this was entertaining enough. I'm not upset that I spent $20 to go see this, but could have been nothing that I'll remember 5 years down the road.
All right. Well, now that we have enticed everyone with this podcast, with our
the movies we're going to be talking about, we do like, though, people. Just,
yeah.
Don't worry.
Yeah, that's well. I should step down from those soapbox a little bit and just be like, listen, every movie I chose, there is a world where this list could have had actually like 5 sequels, reboots, remakes, whatever, that all just as much I enjoyed. I kind of took it upon myself this year to just put out 5 movies. Well, 4 movies, because one is a remake, but 4 movies that are just completely original concepts that I think people should take the time to watch because they are fun. Ian might disagree with that on one of them, but for the most part, they are really fun movies. And some of them are thought provoking, and they're all directors that I'm looking forward to seeing what they can bring to the table later. So,
Yeah. Yeah, I like our list. I mean, a couple of the movies that my top 2 made me bawl my eyes out, which I always enjoy as a sap. So that's always effective. Yeah, again, we did a good job with what we picked, and I think there'll be some, there's some probably people have heard about, but maybe others, like you said, that people haven't heard about it and hadn't gone seen, or just maybe we'll give them another perspective on once they first saw it and didn't care for it. So, all right. We ready to do this, boys?
Let's do it.
let's go.
All right. What in order do I want to go? Let's throw it to Ian first and get it started with a sequel, no, prequel, I guess.
Prequel, yeah.
Right. And we should mention that we're doing science fiction fantasy movies specifically, right? I don't know if we mentioned that.
Well, yeah,
But-
science fiction, fantasy. I'd say like genre movies for the most part, because horror sneaks in there. So, and also we'll do, for the most part, no spoilers. I mean, if we do spoiler something, I think we'll bring it up beforehand. Like, hey, I'm gonna get a little spoilery, but for the most part, we're gonna try to keep it light on spoilers. But yeah.
So I was trying to fill out my top 5 list for science fiction fantasy because most of the movies that I really love this year, only a few of them actually fit that. So I'm not like over the hill for this first one, but I actually just watched it not only a few weeks ago, and I ended up quite liking it. And that's A Quiet Place Day 1.
Oh,
That's the name of it, right?
Yeah, that's the name of it. Yeah.
So far, so good.
Strong, all right.
Which, I mean, I'm a big fan of the first Quiet Place. I really like that movie. I like the sequel quite a bit too. I was a little bit more skeptical the idea that they're coming out with a prequel with different characters, and I'm thinking, okay, well, opening it up could be interesting. The fact that the first one was set on the farm, and then this one's set in the city, that's an interesting switch up for setting. And I ended up actually quite liking it quite a bit. And it's I think they used that setting of being in the city well, right? Because it's the danger is more heightened because there's way more of these creatures. So these creatures that will hunt you based on sound. So you have to be as quiet as you possibly can, which is a lot more difficult to do in an urban area like that. And so I thought it was pretty neat. I thought that the angle that they used with the characters was neat, and they did some cool stuff with it. So I was pretty happy with it. Pleasantly surprised.
Yeah, this was one of my favorite because it came out so earlier in the year. I was like kind of blown away. I was like loved it when I first saw it. I rewatched it at home, and it was still good. I liked it, but didn't quite make my list. I will say I like the directors, the Michael Sarnowski, I think his name. He directed Pig with Nick Cage.
Right. Yeah.
So I remember like really that's kind of what made me most excited at first because I was like, a prequel, who cares? But I was like, oh, the guy from Pig. It's like, all right, big budget, and I like how he deals with that. These movies work because they deal with like a human element, and it's not really a spoiler, but the main character, Lupita's character, has a terminal illness. I think that throws thematically, it's a cool concept where it's like you have essentially with these aliens, the whole world's getting like a terminal illness diagnosis, and how like you have a character like her facing it is very interesting, where she just wants to do one small thing, and nothing's going to stop her and finding purpose in your life at that kind of moment. So that part I liked it, but I really liked Jingle's review about a certain side character in this movie because I thought the same exact thing.
The cat is magical. This is such a perfect cat. I just
incredible, so quiet.
so quiet all the time, and like never, even right now as we're recording, I can hear my cat just like meow. I'm just like, this thing would kill me so fast. I'd have to chuck it across the street. Oh my gosh. But and also a cat that doesn't freak out once you jump into water.
I know that was
I don't
creepy.
know. But
Fully
That
underwater in one
actually,
scene.
fully.
the cat is an interesting idea because it makes no logical sense to have a pet in this situation. Um, but at the same time, you can understand why she does, right? Like
Yeah.
that's her companion, right? She needs that
Mhm.
companion, and so you can understand why she wants to keep the cat around. It's kind of like that complaint of the first movie. It's like, why would these people have a baby in this
Right.
situation?
Yeah. Do
And you're
not
like,
make that mistake.
Right.
and you're like, well, okay, but they also have to just go on with their life, so they gotta kind of try to make their life work in the setting that they're in. And so I never really took that complaint that seriously because I'm like, put yourself in those shoes. Are you just gonna, you're gonna try to move on somehow? So anyway, and I think the cat is a similar situation here. There's a legitimate complaint to be made there, but I think like emotionally, it makes sense to me, so I'm cool with it.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And I think, this movie does a great job of creating tension. I think there are some weird oddities still with the cat, like showing up in the nest or whatever. Um,
Oh yeah.
kind of weird spaces, but this movie, yeah, uses the city environment very much to great effect. There's one scene, I don't want to spoil too much, but there's one scene where Lupita sees people walking by and the crowd just gets slowly larger and larger, and the audio is fantastic. Like they start emphasizing very much everyone's feet crunching, and the mass of people just becomes like, this is not quiet anymore. Whatever y'all are doing, you need to stop, because I see you're trying, but there are just too many of you. And the results are devastating. So I don't know. It seems like the movie was very surprisingly effective in what it was trying to do. I remember watching the first Quiet Place and liking it, but then also at the same time being like, okay, I get the gimmick, and I haven't seen the second one yet, so I'm glad you turned me to this one last minute.
My girlfriend said if that was our cat, we'd have trouble picking her up the whole time.
Agreed.
We have a chunky cat, so that would be a struggle. And I mean, for like a Quiet Place movie, they did pretty good, and then they turned into a prequel. That's a solid move.
Yeah, it worked pretty well.
All right, Jingles. What? This is the only movie I didn't get a chance to watch, and I was super bummed.
Yeah.
Yeah, me neither. Sorry, man.
No worries. Hey, if you watch this movie and you enjoy it, I love you, because this is not going to be to everyone's taste. But my number 5 pick is probably the most original movie you're going to see in 2024. I don't think you're going to find anything that can be beat in that regard. Sasquatch Sunset by the Zellner brothers. Y'all, this movie is wild. It is the story of 4 Sasquatch traveling across the Pacific Northwest, trying to find other Sasquatches and just living their lives. And it is bizarre. It is funny. It has some really, really, really loose ideas of what it means to be human and interacting with the wilderness, and kind of the consequences that come out of our actions without us really thinking about it, and what we do indirectly to things, because animals, I think this movie takes the stance that animals are very stupid and they do very stupid things. I don't know. This is a weird one. But it came out, I think, in March, and I still think about it regularly.
Wow.
So I think this is it's worth your time. I can't promise you're not going to just be like, Jingles, what the heck did you just make me watch? After you see it, but yeah, Sasquatch Sunset.
So how do they deal with communication? Are they like subtitled?
They just
or
grunt at each other. No, there is nothing.
okay.
They grunt at each other. They scream at each other. They you are only cued into what they are talking about based on the actions that they take.
Interesting.
And it's like that for an hour and a half. Yeah.
90 minutes.
Okay.
That's not bad. What a year for Jesse Eisenberg. I mean, starring in this and might be an Oscar contender for a serious pain.
For an actual, yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, it's funny. I'm looking at the reviews on Ian's podcast, Cinema in Seconds. He has guests come on that me and Jingles have been on, and the movie Vampire, Michael, 2.5 stars. Crashed
Yep.
it, but their friend
He's a harsh
Ross,
critic, though.
4 stars and a like. So, I mean, people vibe with it.
Yeah, we're definitely talking about a taste thing. I think when it comes to this movie, and if you're here for the weird, this will be a fun one.
Ross's review, profoundly beautiful, and then in parentheses, once you get past all the fluids. So I think that gives give a little insight to whatever that could be. I was just gonna say it's the same directors who did The Curse, that TV show with
Oh, yeah.
Safdies, and so that
okay.
might give people an insight to what they're in for too.
When you're describing it, kind of reminds me of an old movie from the 80s called Quest for Fire, which was about like prehistoric humans and Neanderthals. And if I remember correctly, I think it was the same idea. Like there's not really a way to know what they're saying. They're just communicating with grunts and stuff, if I remember that movie correctly. But
I think you are, because that's exactly the movie that popped into my head after I watched it. It was like, oh, this is along that vein. I haven't seen that movie since I was like 6 or 7 though. So
yeah, it's been a while.
Yeah.
It reminded me, I haven't really watched, well, I tried to watch this movie, but it was too late. I fell asleep. But just for weird movies this year, it's like, I remember this getting a little bit of buzz in March, but something else that got a lot of buzz was Hundreds of Beavers.
Yeah.
That's just what it reminded me of. I think that movie's some guy like beating up beavers, or he's dressed up as a beaver.
He's a fur trader that's hunting beavers.
Yeah. That one seems more. I haven't seen that one yet. That's on my list. I think it's on Prime right now. But that one I was intrigued by, because it's like the beavers they're just mascot.
They're people in suits.
Like, yeah.
Ian saw it, right? You liked it. Huh?
Yeah, it's very fun.
It's kind of like an old silent film. Is it like?
Yeah, it's like an old silent film, but also kind of like a Looney Tunes cartoon. It's wonderful.
Anyway, so like you said, Jingles, there is, I think we all get a little upset when people say there's nothing like original that ever gets released or like this. And it's like, if you dig deep enough, you're going to find like good stuff. It might not be 5-star masterpieces, but there's originality that's out there. And I think this is like a great showcase of that.
Yeah. And I definitely don't blame anyone for, looking at the top 6 movies and feeling like there's just nothing out there anymore that's new or trying something different. But yeah, like you said, if you dig a little bit deeper, and Sasquatch Sunset, it's not like it wasn't trying. It attached Ari Aster, I think, is the executive producer. And it very much was trying to use his name as kind of their into a little more popularity. I don't think it did very well. Like I said, this is niche, but
yeah.
I don't think how could it not be niche.
The first trailer you ever see is a Red Band trailer, and it's of the 2 of the Sasquatches having sex. Like, I don't like, it wasn't trying very hard to hide what it is.
That's good. I'm gonna watch it though. I wish I would have seen it before recording, but it's on the docket. It'll be on Tubi eventually, I'm sure.
Oh yeah.
All right.
I think it's on Canopy or something too. If you look, like if you have your library accounts, I think it's on something like that.
Well, that's tricky because it's like, I love Canopy. I use it all the time, but sometimes it'll be on Canopy in only certain regions.
True.
Like in the New England region, certain movies are on there, but not in California or whatever. So it could, but it'll show like if on Letterboxd say, hey, it's on Canopy, and I go to look, I'm like, no, it's not. Not for me. So yeah, everyone use Canopy. I love that. Okay. All right, I guess we'll get to my first pick. Sorry, my cat tried to jump the picture. Quiet, please. All right, the first movie I chosen. I had trouble deciding a 5th pick. Like I said, I had my top 4 pretty set.
Gave you one, but
yeah, I know you tried to sneak it in there multiple times. But no. I went with something that I've been thinking about, and I don't know if you guys have seen this movie, since I've seen it, and I don't think I totally understood it, so that's why I didn't want to. I was nervous to put it in, but I picked. I saw the TV Glow that came out this year, and it is. Sorry, it's by Jane Schoenbrunn. Schoenbrunn. I hope I'm pronouncing that right. And it's from the guy who starred in the
Well,
Pokemon
sure
movie.
you're not.
Yeah, definitely not. It's, we'll get that in post. It's starring the guy from the Justice Smith, and it's about like this teenager. His name's Owen, and he lives in the suburbs, and he kind of just spends his time just watching like a late night show that he like loves, and meets a girl who's also really into that show, and they watch it together, kind of bond over it, but slowly like the reality starts to crack, and they don't know what's real and what's not, and it all like is in the basis around this show. And did either of you guys see this movie?
Yeah, I watched it.
So for me, I mean, this movie could be seen, I feel like, and read in 100 different ways. Like there's definitely a trans allegory going into it. But for me, what I took, and I think a lot of people in our Discord, the Legendarium Discord, and maybe people our age in our 30s in that range, is making something like a TV show so much of your personality that it's just almost overwhelming, and it can almost. I thought it was like a cool thing where it almost kind of hinders your life in a way that, like, I feel like today's age, there's so many people like our age who are like still obsessed with the Ninja Turtles, myself being one of them. You know what I mean? And like that still makes it there, puts a whole personality around it. Like I would love to get a Donatello tattoo. I'm like almost 40. And this again, there's nothing wrong with that. I'm not judging it, but it is fascinating. You know what I mean? That our era kind of did that. I don't know if that was the case with people from the 50s or 60s as they were getting up, maybe, but it's such a strong place in time with this film, and not to mention it's kind of like a weird horror film as well. Like the ending kind of like suffocated me. I had like an existential panic attack during that moment. So yeah, so this is one I know in our Discord, Black Diamond, Sean, this is like one of his favorite movies of the year. So we can feel free to join us in Discord, and he'll tell you his opinions on it. But I can't stop thinking about it, and I love movies like that where it did. And I thought the performances were great too. Like that kid's legit, even though he started in the Pokemon movie. But I think he's been getting better and better roles.
I was just gonna say, as somebody who was like unhealthily obsessed with the X-Files when I was a teenager, I got it. Like it spoke to me in that sense. Because now when I look back, I'm like embarrassed about it. I'm pretty sure my like high school yearbook quote was something like, "I don't only care about the X-Files. There's also Star Wars." That was my quote. Um, but I really, that really got to me too. I think well, I don't know that. Do you think they had a specific show in mind? Like they created this fictional show for it, and I hear a lot of people saying like it was based off of Buffy, but like X-Files is where my head went because that's what I was related to. That's what I related to. But I don't know if they
Buffy
had a
was where I
specific-
went. Buffy was the show that came to my mind when I was watching it, and yeah, I see the parallels a lot. I think because of the supernatural elements and like the way that the story of the show feels almost comic booky. I think Buffy makes a lot of sense. The other one that came to mind for me was Supernatural, and not necessarily for me. The show was fine, but the idea that like we create now for one show huge conventions just centered on the one show, and like the ultra fans that just kind of come out of growing into those shows it's kind of disturbing at times. I'm a person who's very much surrounded by the things he enjoys, but it's investment at a time. How do I want to word this? I watched this, and I watched We're All Going to the World's Fair, this director's I think the first movie in this eventual trilogy. The theme of social isolation at a time of crucial development seems to be a very key component to what this person is trying to navigate. And yeah, putting yourself so wholly into a show because you feel like you have nothing else, and just kind of seeing the anxieties that develop out of actually having to interact with the world after the fact. It can get really scary. I mean, yeah, the last 5 minutes of this movie
Brutal.
kind of came out of nowhere. Yeah.
I
Just
was
like, oh my gosh.
I was like holding my chest. I'm like, oh my God, this is.
Yeah.
To your point, I also like there's a scene, one of my favorite scenes in this movie is like, he kind of goes back in his life when he gets older and he kind of tries to relive what he's doing, sitting on the couch, staying up late, watching his favorite show. And he does it, but years later when maybe he's a young adult or something. And to see how it looked totally different to him. He wasn't as sucked in. It didn't
Yeah.
age well, it was like kiddie. And it's like, how many times does that happen to us where we're trying to go back in our 20s, 30s, rewatching our favorite shows? And it's just like, this is kind of sucks. What do we thought? Like, why was I obsessed with this? Like, the one that came to mind was the Transformers Beast Wars cartoon. I used to think that was
yeah.
like the coolest thing in the world. And it's on Tubi, and I like tried to rewatch it. I'm like, this looks like garbage. This looks like Windows 95. Like, why did I like this? And it's just, I think that the way, like, that's why I love film is that a director can so much relate to their audience, a certain either portion of their audience, where it's like, totally get that. That's like speaking to me on a personal level somehow. But I love stuff like that. So
Yeah, they did a great job of getting the nostalgia blinders. Did a great job of portraying that. Because the show that it was like that he had in his mind that we kept seeing glimpses of is like, okay, this kind of seems like a weird but pretty cool show. and then you see what the show actually was, and you're like, oh my goodness.
it reminded me of like a Power Rangers episode at some point. You know what I mean? Like, I was like, oh yeah, woof.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm excited to see the third movie in this trilogy, to see where it goes. Because I think it's obviously a bit older, but
Spiritual trilogy. They're not actually like connected.
no,
right?
they're all tied thematically more than actually together. But I think the steps moved from one to the other were interesting to watch back to back.
All right, let's get to our fourth picks. I'm going to skip Ian for a second because me and Ian share our favorite movie. So let's go to Jingles, your fraudulent fourth pick.
It's not fraudulent. Listen, okay. So I chose.
Girls, you picked it.
Yeah, I chose Civil War, directed by Alex Garland, and the reason I chose it was because Alex Garland, up until this point, I think has mostly written science fiction, and I think a lot of
pretty
his,
much.
and he's definitely only directed science fiction, and I think a lot of the things that he has learned from doing those things are very present here in Civil War. Most notably being that, like, yes, it probably doesn't fall directly under the umbrella of sci-fi, but this movie is purely speculative in its methods and in the way that it tries to approach journalism and war and ideologies in the way that it uses the US as a good platform for what it wants to discuss, but does not necessarily have to stick to the US as its location. This one's heavy. I don't know. I was very surprised by what this movie ended up actually being, because like everyone else, when this was being advertised, I was just like, how do you get Texas and California to join up on the same team? Or how do you get, why is Florida isolated? The breakdown of the US map for this movie was fascinating to me. And then once you actually start watching the movie, it becomes pretty quickly apparent that you should not waste your time trying to figure out those details, because what this is far more interested in is looking at our relationship with violence, with our political ideologies, regardless of what they are, and how we choose to record our civil unrest. It's a big movie. I think there's probably a lot more I could get out of it. I need to watch it again. Kaylee Spaney was a huge reveal for me this movie. I don't think I really
the number 4 spots. We'll just see that.
Yes, he is. Turns out. And then the scene with Jesse Plemons is also just like one of the most horrifying scenes of the year. So yeah, that's why I put it in here.
this is like legit one of my. I gave this. This is why Ian will get riled up. I gave this like 3.5 stars. It's one of my favorite movies of the year, easily. Like it's, it's just, well, I mean, sometimes you come out of a movie and you're just, I literally, I was like shook after watching that movie. I was like, I don't, because like you said, you have expectations of what you think it's going to be. And if you don't like it, I think it's because you hold on to those expectations, or you hold on to what you want it to be, or what you think the director should make it about. But once you just engage with what it is, I mean, it's profound, and hopefully not fortuitous. But the biggest thing that I really loved about this is just like the lack of communication in this world. And I think what really the director worries about is just no one can communicate anymore.
Yeah.
And that's with all these people and all these characters, the Jesse Plemons scene, like there's just no terrible communication through there, either a lack of wanting to or a maliciousness, or even there's a sniper scene that's amazing, where the characters are with snipers and they're like, why are you shooting at this person? He said, who cares? Like there's no little, like, there is no, political sides really about beliefs or anything on either side. There's just no communicate. They're just doing it. So that was kind of one of the more horrifying things for me in that movie. And the performances are great. I love Kaylee Spaney. I saw her in this 2020 movie called How. I forget what it's called, but everyone bashed it. Oh, How It Ends. It's clearly a pandemic movie, but like everyone bashed it. I thought it was profound. It's kind of like this girl, the last day on Earth, like a meteor's coming, and everyone's just kind of going to parties and like saying hi to their neighbors, like going totally normal. But she's hanging out with her younger version of herself, played by Kaylee Spaney. Anyway, I thought it was beautiful. But yeah, Civil War is legit. Like Alex Garland could do no wrong in my book. Even Men, that disgusting movie. Like, I'm in. I'm in.
If that's the worst he can do, I mean, I'm never gonna forget Men. I know. I remember Men very distinctly.
Yeah. I think that this is one of the best movies of the year. I really do. So I'm with you. I'm with both of you guys on here. I didn't include it on this list because of the genre thing. But I get what you're saying. Like, it does kind of feel like a dystopian sci-fi in a way, but not quite at the same time. And it doesn't have like really fantastical out there elements like dragons or tornadoes. So,
That's right.
but we'll get into that a little bit later. But I think I love what you said about the lack of communication. That is exactly what this movie is about. And it's almost like Garland is saying he's using this setting not to say anything about current politics, which I think is what disappointed people.
Yeah.
But he's saying it's almost like this is a warning. Like, this is where we could end up if we're not careful, right? If we don't find ways to merge our different views together, this is a possibility. Because it's like we see this in other places in the world, and it's like we don't want, well, America in this case, but I'm in Canada. It's a similar culture. We don't want to see ourselves end up in that place, but so watch out. Like, let's be better, right? And so I really like that message too. So,
and Garland's from the UK, so I mean, he sees it all. His isn't totally American point of view that everyone says it's about America. It's like his biggest worries come from any interview you talk about. It stems from the UK and, delves into other countries like us. But, like politically, or not politically, but real world stuff, I do think there's a cool, I think Jingo's commented on it, but touching on like the job of journalists and journalism in a country that's gone mad, so to speak, and what you'll do, and kind of getting this rush to get whatever story, and even a rush to the ending. What I'm not going to spoil the ending, but there's journalists who are juiced about it, trying to want to be the first one to be in the action, so to speak. And it's what kind of mentality is that in a sense, and what does it do to the people who are doing it, taking those photos and getting in the line of danger and even hindering some of what's going on, being in the middle of this. I think is an interesting. Are they selfish or are they heroes? I really think it's like both, and I think like he was commenting on it. Like there is some selfishness to the people that were in that movie, the good guys, so to speak.
Yeah, I think very much making a statement about the neutrality of being a journalist does not necessarily exist at a time when brutal things are happening. There's like one scene in the middle of the movie where they're all just right behind two people that maybe more. A couple people are shooting up at another building, and
Right.
one of the people by them goes down and is clearly not quite dead yet. Like could use some help, and they're just sitting there taking pictures of him because they're not supposed to interfere. And seeing that layer back is really troublesome. um,
I will say I would love to see Kirsten Dunst get a nomination for this. I think she was outstanding in this movie.
God, she was. Yeah, they don't. I'm not going to get on an Oscars rant, but it's not going to happen. Hopefully, for another actress in a out there movie we're going to talk about later. All right, great pick,
I think
Jingles.
that one has a better chance. But
Yeah,
yeah,
Yeah.
it's looking like it. All right, Ian, let's go to your fourth pick, which is also my fourth pick, but I'm going to let you break it down.
yeah. So we're going to talk about Alien Romulus, which is the 7th in the series. 9th if you count Alien versus Predator, which nobody does. Yeah, so Alien Romulus was interesting for me because I was not at all interested in this movie. Like when we're talking about looking at the lists of movies coming up, and they were all sequels. I saw this, and it's just like, really, and I was like, I was gonna ignore it. I was actually not gonna even bother seeing it. And I even mentioned, like, on my Cinnamon Seconds, when we did a podcast where we structured a whole podcast about franchises we don't care about anymore because this movie was coming out. And so I was like, I declared there, like, I don't care about this Romulus coming out. When I saw the preview, it looked like it was just going to rehash everything about the franchise. But then my dad said, "Oh, there's a new Alien movie coming out. You want to go see it?" And I'm like, "Well, yeah, if my dad wants to go see a movie with me, I'm going to go see this movie." So then I went to see it, and I was like, I actually quite like that. Like I enjoyed that movie quite a bit. There were some moments where it was like, they shouldn't have done that. They shouldn't have done that, because it just felt like rehashing. But for the most part, I would say that it was kind of a fresh angle for the most part. I think that they did some really interesting things with what was established. Like, for example, the acid blood. I think they did some cool stuff with the acid blood. And I just thought it was a really fun ride that fit the series, but also was kind of its own thing at the same time. So, what about you, Matthew?
Yeah, I unabashedly loved it. I thought even like some of the complaints I kind of pushed back on. Like one of them, people complained that they did a quote from like one of the earlier movies from Ripley. It's like, please, can we, touch some grass? And then there was like the other one was like there's a CGI or the CGI bringing someone back. Don't want to totally spoil it, but I listened to an interview with the director, and it kind of won me over on that thing where it's like before he did it, he called the family of the person who passed and brought up the idea, and they kind of loved it because before he passed, this actor thought that Hollywood kind of passed him by and wasn't using him in it, didn't appreciate him and things like that. So they really got a lot out of them. A lot of, they think he would have felt great about even being considered for something like this. So, not every circumstance is like that when they do this stuff, but kind of lessened my kind of immediate disgust for it when I saw it. But as a film, I feel like you can put it in two categories, an alien film and a horror film. As an alien film, I don't care. I'm not an alien historian. There's definitely probably quibbles you could do with the lore and stuff. But as a horror film, I loved it. I mean, it's essentially like a haunted house movie. They go up to this spaceship and you're trying to get out. And it's like a creepy spaceship, like Ian said, with this goo, the acid goo. I loved the android in it this time. David Johnson, who's in, Ian hates this movie because he's a hater, but Rye Lane, and he's just incredibly talented actor. And to see him I thought he like stole the show. Like without him, I think it would have been a little more mid. While talking about Kelly Spaney, I mean, she's back. And but he was like, I liked him better than Fassbender. I said that in my review. I'm not scared to say it. We can start off hot takes. He's the best android in the Alien franchise. But yeah, I just as a straight horror movie, like when you want your scares, it wasn't too CG. I think he brought back some practical stuff in it, and used some puppets or whatever for the aliens, which is kind of cool. Yeah, it was. Again, this is like what I'm talking about. It's like this isn't the most memorable year because of Alien Romulus, but it's just there's a ton of like, hey, that was pretty good. Like that was like a good time, and like I have no regrets of seeing that. And another positive entry into the series.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's the third best Alien movie. And I've been, I don't know how hot a take that is, but I've been like, it's a lot like 1 and it's a lot of like 2, and that makes it the third best. Like, um, but
Ian
did.
steaming.
I'm not a big fan of
Prometheus.
Prometheus. Yeah,
I like that they brought Prometheus into this movie, though. I thought that was pretty
yeah.
cool.
And I think I think that was its own horror at the end there, but yeah, I agree I think David Johnson and Kaylee Spaney are at the core of this movie, like by far the best actors, and everyone else kind of unfortunately falls into the horror category of these people are meat. they're for the
red
deaths.
shirts.
Yeah. But yeah, I do enjoy both of them quite a bit. And then the facehuggers also sold me on this one. I think this is the first Alien movie where we actually see facehuggers like throughout and with the xenomorphs at the same time. Like there were times in this movie where people would be cornered with a facehugger on one side and a xenomorph on the other side. It was like, this sucks. This is not a good position to be in at all. And I really appreciated that. And I thought, the stop motion that they used for the facehuggers was really effective. So,
and that scene where they have to go through that corridor that's just like full of them. That's like, oh
yeah,
man, that was quite a scene. Yeah.
And he's an interesting director. If you like horror, he did one of the Evil Dead remakes, right?
He did the first remake, yeah.
Yeah, the first one, yeah. So, I'm sure they'll make more of them after this. But he made Don't Breathe too, and one of the terrible spider girl with the dragon tattoos movies.
Oh, yeah, I forgot we did more than one of those in the U.S. Huh?
Well, there's only one in the U.S. They made some in the or did they make them in the U.S.? I thought
there's the Fincher one. But then I want to say there was one recently that's not even based on one of the 3 original.
Yeah, I think that was his.
Yeah, Claire Foy. Oh my goodness, I didn't even know. Lakeith Stanfield. Wow, cooking. I'm gonna watch that. It's a.
Did Lakeith Stanfield did it? Yeah. Okay, never mind.
Even more shit. I'm like, oh, yeah, it's not too bad. Anyway, all right, great picks by us. Let's go. I love that episode you did, by the way, Ian. The movies or franchises you gave up on. I remember when you said it, we all like chimed in, I think on Legendarium Discord, and I was like immediately Terminator. I think, is that not the number one thing? Who wants to see a new Terminator?
Nobody.
Nobody.
Yeah. All right. Let's go Jingles. Let's do I like this movie. Let's go to a little horror action for your number 3.
Yeah. All right. So my number 3 is Oddity, and the director for that is Damien McCarthy. I did a pretty fun thing this year where I watched 100 horror movies leading up to Halloween.
That's insane.
Insane. I was a little worried about it, and then I realized, you know what? I migrate towards horror so often anyway that this is just my Friday nights. I can watch 3 movies and wipe this out and be okay. And also, surprisingly, didn't see like too much junk. I think I had a pretty good list built up, and one of the movies that had really been circulating in the summer that people said you absolutely had to give a look to, I think Mike Flanagan on Letterboxd was really pushing the charge for this movie, was Oddity, and it was really fun. This movie presents the worst 10 minutes of anyone's life, I think, right up front. Just being
Great
caught.
opening,
Just being caught in a totally between a rock and a hard place, and not knowing what the right answers are, and tension just building out of that. Knowing that whatever decision you make could cost you your life. It inevitably will cost you your life, because how could you make the right decision? And then it just gets a lot smaller. Like that really is the most tension in the entire movie. And then you get after that a revenge play, which is very small. It takes place pretty much all in one room, but it's really effective because it's usually 2 people talking and then this creepy doll mannequin thing.
The wooden man.
Yeah, the wooden man. just sitting at the table with its mouth wide open, just yelling at you. And the rest of the movie is pretty much waiting for that doll to do something. This was a really great example of what can be done with very little, I think. And I
Which
really enjoyed it.
horror is great at,
Yeah,
being able to showcase that. This is like this was like an ultimate like sense of dread movie where I saw someone's review, it might have been Chris Stuckman or someone, where he talks about that and Hitchcock had like a quote where it's like the thing at the under the table kind of thing, where it's like once you have it there, you're just dreading it the whole time, because viewers know it's there and you're just waiting for something bad to happen. And I felt like that was, I get it, like he said, that's the wooden man, and that's exactly how it felt like this whole time. Like once that's placed in there, you're just like, something's gonna go on with this wooden man, or this, I think there's like a wooden chest too, or was that what the wooden man was in?
I think the wooden chest is what the wooden man was in.
Yeah, so it did feel very Hitchcockian in that sense, where you're just, I'm ticking away, and then obviously the plot kind of reveals itself with the family drama that's going on, and it took me a little bit, but I'm like, oh yeah, I see what's going on. Yeah, oh boy. So, and yeah, and I just felt like even like that husband character sucked, like the lack of empathy I think some people have.
Oh yeah, he was so terrible.
Yeah. Anyway, but yeah, this was a great find. I mean, Shudder, I'm usually team Tubi when it comes to horror, but Shudder, I mean, if you love horror, there's probably no better place to watch them.
No, and it's like it's a cheat. Shudder is great. I love it. I think it's one of the channels that I just consistently have running, even though I don't necessarily always watch it, just because I'm interested to see what they come out with. And people seem to really love, a lot of the stuff that they fund too. Oddity's one of those. This director, Damien McCarthy, he has another movie called Caveat, which I think is also worth a look. That one's also very bizarre. And actually, these two movies are somehow connected, because the main character of this is a collector of haunted items. And in Caveat, one of the items is a toy bunny that claps symbols when evil is, or when magical things are around. So you get to see that at the beginning, when she first reveals the doll.
Looking at that bunny's face, horrifying.
That
is not run of the mill bunnies.
No, toys were built different back then.
Yeah, no, Oddity was great. You put me onto it, and I really enjoyed watching that throughout my my mild horror month. Only 31 movies or 32 in the month. Sorry,
chump numbers.
What a lightweight.
Yeah, sorry, I'm not really a fan. I dabble.
Yeah. Do you think that he's like a director to watch? Like, do you think he's going to do awesome things in the future?
Yeah, it's kind of hard to say. So far, like I said, I've really enjoyed both of his movies that I've seen. I don't know what he's gonna. I imagine Oddity is gonna give him some clout, and I think he's gonna be getting a little bit more money. But I don't know if he's ever gonna be a director that really breaks out of the independent sphere all that much. And I don't know if I'd really want to, because he hasn't really shown much bigger or beyond needing what he has. So.
Well, those are his only two features. I mean, he did some shorts, so I could see Blumhouse asking him to do something original or do one of the remakes. He like Oddity's legit. Like there's a reason people kind of took notice of this one at least. And his first one was like a 2020 movie, so it's like all those movies got friggin' lost in the shuffle. I mean, I remember I tried rewatching some 2020. I'm like, man, these just came and went. Some of them, you know what I mean?
Yeah. I'm still discovering a lot out of that year that I just didn't see for whatever reason. The weird bit about it being probably that a lot of stuff just wasn't streaming yet, and they didn't know how to get it to streaming. So
right, Tubi wasn't available yet. All right, that's enough Tubi talk for me. Let's shimmy over to Ian's number 3. A lot of people are fans of this in our Legendarium Discord. I know.
Yeah, so number 3, I went with Furiosa, which is the follow-up to Mad Max Fury Road. So it's the Mad Max movie without Mad Max. But it looks at the character Furiosa who showed up in Fury Road, but it's like her story leading up to Fury Road and with a different actress. So they went with Anya Taylor-Joy instead of Charlize Theron this time because she's got to be younger. and I thought it was pretty cool. I like that they didn't just try to copy Fury Road, which honestly I think a lot of people who had issues with this movie, I think that was the issue, is they wanted a Fury Road Part 2, and this isn't that. This is a little bit more it focuses on the world building more of this crazy post-apocalyptic world, and I kind of like that it leaned into different things than Fury Road leaned into, and I was pleasantly surprised because I actually, just like Romulus, this was not one I was interested in that much. It was one that I kind of like, oh, I don't really care to see this, and then when I did, I was like, okay, I'll actually like that quite a bit. So I think Chris Hemsworth is hamming it up as the villain, which I enjoyed quite a bit. I liked what he was doing, but I can see that people would be turned off by it. But I thought he was a lot of fun. So yeah, I like Furiosa.
I enjoyed Furiosa as well. I thought it was a great movie. I saw it twice in theaters, actually. The first time I watched it, I think I was in that kind of that mindset of, this is going to be Fury Road Part 2. This is going to be great. I knew it was a prequel because I don't think you cast Anya Taylor-Joy to be an older Charlize Theron. But yeah, I was kind of expecting a lot more extreme. Like, we're going to just go balls to the wall for this one. Yeah, you don't really get that. There's still some really cool scenes. I think they still do plenty. And after watching it the first time, I was like, coming to the realization, George Miller can't do this his entire life. Like, if he tried to do Fury Road again, I think he would accidentally kill himself, like if not someone else on set. Like, it's untenable trying to keep that momentum up. But yeah, I really enjoyed Anya Taylor-Joy. I really enjoyed Chris Hemsworth. I enjoyed the bigger look at the Australia of whatever year this is. Yeah. And I think the one complaint I would have is I think I wish there was a little bit more, just a little bit more depth to Furiosa. There was coming off of 3,000 Years of Solitude as his last movie. That's the right name? No. What was the genie that Idris Elba?
I think that's what it was. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. No, 3,000. No, 3,000 years. 300 Years of Longing.
Yeah,
that's what it was. Yeah.
Ian had it on his list one year for.
Right.
Yeah.
I was just trying to think if you got the number right.
Yeah. I think it has a 3 in it. It has a 3. Yeah. But after coming off of that movie, I really love George Miller's vision, and I love the way that he sees his worlds. And I think Furiosa does some of that, but not necessarily enough. I don't know. Bullet Town was cool. Yeah, I don't know. I think it's hard for Mad Max to really expand beyond what it's been known for.
That's fair.
And I think you kind of see that struggle in this movie a little bit.
Yeah, I guess this is my hot take. Not hot take. I like the movie, but I feel like I'm taking crazy pills with the Chris Hemsworth performance. Everyone else is like, this guy's an Oscar-winning actor after this performance, and I don't know. I'm trying to put it where he felt so out of place in this movie that I feel like it hindered the movie. Where it's like, in a nutshell, I liked what he was doing. It was funny and kind of goofy, and he was stretching his chops, I guess, a little bit. But it wasn't the movie that everyone else was in, and it kind of brought the gravitas down. Even like near the end when there's like a show off, I'm like, I don't know. Like, if it's a revenge tale, I didn't really hate this guy, even though he did heinous things. He was just so goofy. I just couldn't. And not that it's the first, the stupid prosthetic nose. Like, it's not that the first goofy looking villain, but he didn't sell it. Where I was like thinking of a comp, the opposite, where it's like in the movie The House of Gucci, like Jared Leto's performance is ridiculous, but it's so ridiculous that made the movie better. Like, everyone else was serious, and if he was serious too, it would have just been forgettable. But he elevated it in his ridiculous Mario accent. Whereas this one, I feel like everything else was good enough that he just had to wish it was more menacing, even though his actions were menacing. But anyway, so yeah, safe to say.
I liked it.
Yeah, I get it. I don't want to push too hard on that. But like other performances that like really stuck out to me though was like Furiosa's mom, that like intro. I thought she was
Yeah.
amazing, that Australian
Mhm.
actress. And then Praetorian Jack, who she learns from, that guy who's like she's his protege. Like he was amazing. Some of that big stunt sequence where they kind of go through that circle area and try to escape from there. Like he was legit. Like those two kind of stuck out more than whatever Hemsworth was hamming it
Yeah.
up.
Yeah. I mean, the framing of the movie is very interesting, right? Because it is kind of built more as an old saga than it is anything else.
Right.
So Chris Hemsworth gets a lot of time to chew up the scenery in the beginning and then really doesn't do much for another hour before they bring him back to kind of finalize what's going on.
Yeah.
And I need to remember if the thing that happens to him at the end is in Fury Road at all. Do you know? Because I don't, and that's part of why this movie kind of
His
missed with me.
character?
Yeah,
I
Yeah.
don't know.
No, I know what you're talking about. I'm not
yeah.
You're
sure
talking
if
about
it
that image.
is.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm not
Yeah.
sure.
There's a lot of mythologizing that's happening for a character that is really good. Like Charlize Theron and Furiosa and Fury Road are amazing, but the myth of Furiosa, you have to come in wanting to buy that, right? Like I don't think it ever does anything to actually emphasize or to emphasize itself. Like it doesn't actually ever sell itself properly.
Yeah. And, I like Furiosa too. But I think a lot of this is like Fury Road is just so good. Like it's hard not to, I try to keep in my head to just disassociate with that and just view it on its own merits, but it's just so hard not to compare it to Fury Road, and like
I
that
think maybe
movie's,
that is a matter of expectations because when I saw Fury Road and then I heard they were going to make a sequel, I was thinking maybe this is my negativity speaking, but I was like, they're never going to live up to this. So I was like, I didn't even want them to make a sequel because I'm like, it's only going to be disappointing.
yeah.
And so when this one came out now and it was something different, I think that worked for me. Whereas I can see if you were like wanting more Fury Road, I can see that it wouldn't work as well.
Yeah, and I think on the Discord Furiosa just came up like last night. I think people were discussing, the use of CG in the movie,
Right.
and how it's kind of throwing them off, and some of the quick cut or the accelerated frame rates, which are pretty standard in George Miller's work, but I think because there is kind of less action, they become far more noticeable.
Yeah.
That's fair.
In some cases, which I don't think George Miller's ever hesitated to use CG in his work. I think just because we have this weird idea of Fury Road being all practical and incredibly dangerous, it's very stark comparison once you get there.
Well, they had to use CGI for those tornadoes scene because I mean,
Yeah, there was no way to.
tornadoes are so fantastical. There's such an out there concept that you can only really create them through computer
Good
generation.
segue.
This is a beautiful segue. Good job, Ian. So you're a pro. And so I picked with my number 3 pick, Twisters by, starring Glenn Powell, my Lord and Savior, but also directed by Lee Isaac Chung, who, if you remember, did Minari in 2020, one of the best films of that year. Very quiet film, like very quiet. I have no idea why they picked him to do this, but they did. And yeah, I mean, can you really spoil Twisters? Two people who don't get along. Well, it's actually interesting. Glenn Powell is like a YouTuber who just goes around filming tornadoes, which I thought is very like, that's very relevant in today's day and age. I'm sure there would be YouTubers who like tornadoes, whereas Daisy Edgar, there are, okay.
Yeah.
And Daisy Edgar Jones, she just is more of a scientific thing and trying to create things that'll save lives with tornadoes, and gets into the science fiction part because I don't want to spoil too much, but she creates something that is literally impossible. So I'll just leave it at that.
That's what made this eligible for this list.
It's science
Oh,
fiction.
yeah.
They created something. They created some. I looked at. I went home that night because I knew I wanted to put it on this podcast. I looked up. I said, "Is it possible?" I'm going to spoil it. I don't care. No one cares about Twisters. Is it possible to create something to totally dissolve a tornado, to just take it away? And they said, "No, it is not possible to do that." So that's science fiction. That is not real. That's not going to
Just
save lives.
on a side note, are you? I was kind of looking at like what movies I'm looking forward to. I'm really looking forward to Fantastic Four. What about you guys?
Was this a
'Cause-
joke?
Because Yeti, this is. I mean, Mr. Fantastic's got to be your favorite superhero because you love to stretch things, and that is exactly what you're doing here.
What are we doing? Okay.
I was waiting for it. I was like, I don't know. I know there's a dig. It's a dig somewhere in here. I mean, frankly, my next pick, I literally have no argument with. So, I mean, this is. I mean,
I like
really,
your next pick in this
know.
list, but this one.
as far as fantasy goes, well, it's just again. I mean, hey, I'll tell you this: it's more likely that what's going to happen in Civil War happens than in Twisters. All right, I'll put it that way.
Don't turn this on me.
That's fair.
No, but yeah, I mean, this is just. I thought this was one of the most fun summer blockbusters we had this year. It's not original because it's a sequel essentially, or I don't even know what kind of sequel. There's like a term for legacy sequel.
Requel, yeah.
Yeah. Because there's no characters really from the first one. But I guess I love Glenn Powell. Like I'm in the I tried to get away to put Hitman on this list, but that's not really fantasy at all.
Really,
yeah. But he's like one of my favorite, up and coming movie stars. He's learning from the best, Tom Cruise. And in the theater, this felt like amazing. Like I was worried about the CG. I was like, come on. Well, I guess the first one had CGs, but I didn't know how it would look and things like that. And I just thought I had low expectations, and it was. I don't even really like the first Twisters, honestly. I thought this was better than that one. But yeah, I put like when I rank things and I talk about movies I love, I put a lot of stock into like rewatchability. Like, am I going to keep watching this throughout the years? And some movies I love on first watch, I'm just like, I don't really feel like watching that ever again, or I need to be in the right mindset. But like movies like Twisters or My Lord and Savior, Top Gun Maverick, like I'll throw them on all the time just to be in a good mood and entertain, which I think movies, ultimately should do. So go ahead, slander my beloved Twisters.
No, I'm gonna leave you alone. I got my jibes in because I do like Twisters. I was just bugging you about. I don't know that it's on a sci-fi fantasy list, but I enjoyed this one too. It's very much a retread of what the first Twisters was, though. Too. I mean, we should say that up front. But in an age where it's like sometimes you just want just a fun blockbuster like that in the summertime, and this provided that absolutely, just like the first one did all those years ago.
That's what I'm really looking forward to next summer, when I can like put my projector out in my backyard and have this movie playing for like the neighborhood, right?
Yeah.
Like it's gonna be you can have a barbecue to this movie and you can enjoy it. And so this also ignited my Glenn Powell boy crush, because I think I went and watched Twisters, and then like in the next 3 days I watched Anyone But You, Hitman, and just went down the Glenn Powell rabbit hole.
Everybody wants some. The Richard Linklater, Days and Confused.
That's next on the list. I need to get to
incredible.
That. Yeah.
He's so good in that movie. That's anyway. All right, good. I'm glad. So all right, we're into our number twos, our top twos, and we're gonna have to finagle some things because there's a big one we got to talk about. But let's again. So Ian, we're gonna skip you, and we're gonna save that for the number, because Jingles number 2 is Ian's number 1. Or no,
other way around.
Ian's number 2 is Jingles number 1.
Surprised.
Yeah, sorry, I forgot what came out this year. So let's go to Jingles number 2 and Ian's podcast host Daniel's number 1, I assume.
That's what I got to imagine. This is in Ian number 2 on Ian's worst 10 list.
It's close.
It's close. Yes. The Substance. Oh man. Who directed this? I'm gonna mess up her name. I apologize. Coralie Fargyat.
Yep.
Fargyat. Yeah. This movie is an ode to, in my opinion, Cronenberg and Lynch in some of the best ways. And also adds like a modern feminist critique. I don't know. I think I should preface, this movie for me does not do anything very new. But it does it with so much style that I am just very pleased with what I got. It's the story of a woman who has pretty much aged out of how her work perceives her. She is aged out of her value pretty much. That people don't want her necessarily to be the face of anything anymore because she's quote unquote too old. Um, and so feeling that and having the vanity of that kind of hit her, she becomes interested in a thing called the substance. And the substance gives you 7 days in a younger body. And you have to switch out every 7 days because if you don't, bad things will start happening. This movie is incredibly body horror focused, almost to the point of parody. I think, and Yeti, I'm actually gonna, I think, steal some of your words here. Like, it becomes actually a little numbing at the end how much body horror is happening in this movie. That said, I love the flair of it. I think Demi Moore is having a ton of fun in the latter half of this movie, and I think Margot Qualley does a great job as her younger self. So, yeah, it's a great movie. This will be in my Blu-ray collection, and it will be a rewatch many times over. So
Hopefully that's Oscar nominee Demi Moore.
yeah,
Their buzz. It's building. So yeah, I saw this and yeah, I saw it in theaters and loved it too. The end, I thought my criticisms were it's a bit too long and repetitive. I think it kind of, but it does have the flair, so it didn't like totally bother me. Like visually, I was like, I'm a straight guy. I can look at Margaret Qualley doing her workout routine as much as she wants to do. But and the ending was a bit much, and I wasn't like offended by it or anything, but it was just so much that I was just like, and frankly, I don't even know how else you would end it. Like it really isn't a
yeah,
criticism. It just is like it didn't have. I was just like, okay, yeah, I get it. But I thought this was an incredible take on like addiction and how I think I was telling Dan and Ian when I went on their podcast because I know we joke, but Daniel like hates this movie, and but just the comparisons to addiction, like having to keep doing something over and over and digging yourself into a hole. Like you said, there's the rules for this is you can only use it for 7 days, and you have to go back to your old body after 7 days, and just how you cheat on that little by little, and you try to get back what you've lost, and like anyone can relate to that. And I also liked how it's like a commentary on how we treat our bodies and the effects it has on our older self. Like I was saying, we eat terribly now and it's going to affect how we feel and look down the line, but we don't care. We're selfish about it, and we're going to still do it because we want to do it now, either if it's drugs, alcohol, food, lifestyle, stuff like that. And the way that this movie conveys that is gross, and horrifying. And also, I mean, listen, we're three dudes on here. I mean, there's a whole other outlook on this, for women and how they're treated and viewed. And it's no mistake all the men. Like the most horrifying maybe thing in this movie is Dennis Quaid eating shrimp up close.
oh, absolutely, it's so gross.
Yeah, but they're all portrayed, terribly or only wanting something out of the women or how they look, dates with them. It's there's a lot of meat on the bone with this, whether you like it or not. And I think this is probably the most divisive, even with Civil War. I think this is the most divisive movie of the year.
Yeah, I'd agree. I've seen a lot of criticisms about like like how could you ever believe Demi Moore has aged out, like is not beautiful or whatever. And I'm just like, I think
Come on.
you're not reading this movie right if you're putting that out as a criticism against it. Like this movie is very much focused on the idea of vanity run amok, and you should not you should not assume that anyone in this is actually any of their thoughts should actually be taken that seriously.
Okay, I don't like this movie, but I have no issue with somebody putting this on their top of the year list. Jiggles, if you would have put like Madam Web on here, I might take a little bit of issue with that. But this movie, I understand its value. I see why it works for so many people. It just does not work for me. And for a while there, like I was on quite a journey with this movie because for a while there, I was like, oh, I might actually end up really liking this because for the first part, I did end up really enjoying it. I thought that both actresses were amazing. I thought that kind of neon 90s effect that it like um aesthetic that it has was really interesting. Like there's a scene where she's like walking down some boulevard in Los Angeles with the palm trees and it's like neon pink everywhere, and I'm like, okay, this is kind of neat. Like this director's got an eye for sure. And then when we find out what the substance is, and you have, I don't want to go into too much, but you have that scene where it's like with the spine and then where the premise takes hold. And I was like, oh, that wasn't too bad. I can handle this. I think I can handle this. If that was the extent of the gross out, I'm good. And I was like, okay, I'm in for this movie. But that was not the extent of it at all. And eventually it just like, I was just like, no, I can't do it anymore. It was too gross. I couldn't handle it.
We're proud of you for trying.
Yeah, I am proud of you
Give
for
it a go.
trying, because you are one of those people. Whenever I watch a movie like this, is like, oh, I need Ian to watch this, but I also feel sorry for Ian having to watch this.
Yeah. And I just couldn't believe just how far it took that idea. Like, oh my
Dude, the last half hour of this movie is kind of hilarious. I mean, it just goes for it so hard.
Yeah.
And I don't know. I like it gets to be a little much at times, but I also still find it just not repulsive in any way. I mean, I think that's a personal thing. But yeah, just funny.
Yeah, we've seen worse, sadly.
Yeah.
All right, great pick. I love the substance too. So my number 2 is This Is Where I Cheating. But I was very passionate about this movie. When I saw it, it took me by surprise, and I was like, oh man, I want more people to watch it, essentially. And hopefully this podcast does that. So it's called The Remarkable Life of Ibelin. And it's a Netflix documentary. And it's about the story of this kid named Matt, who has I'm blanking on the disease he has, but like a degenerative disease from birth, and that eventually throughout his life, he won't be able to walk, and he can't. Eventually, has to go in a wheelchair, and it's tough for him to move. And he, it's no spoiler, like his life is going to be shortened. And at the start of this movie, he's passed away already. But the movie, and why I put it cheatingly in fantasy, is because he played a lot of World of Warcraft, and in this game, what his parents found out through a journal he had is that he had this massive life on World of Warcraft with tons of friends and a huge community that he was a massive part of. And it was like the second life that they had no idea about, his sister or his parents. And, when I watch it, I'm a sap for that stuff. So I was just like, it was just incredibly moving to me. And I hope everyone watches it just to see that. But also, I thought it was interesting how, like, I'm out of the gamer space, really, I guess. But a lot of times with these stories, you see gaming and online gaming as like a negative thing. How toxic it can be, and the vitriol. And so this was just like a breath of fresh air of what gaming can be with a community, and how it can shape your life, especially for someone who wasn't going to. He talks about in his journal. Again, it's incredible how much information they have on him, and how the filmmakers use World of Warcraft to reenact some things from his life in the game and his thoughts. But he's upset. He's being very vulnerable. How he'll never get to kiss a girl. He'll never get to joke or go swimming or things like that. But he gets a portion. He gets that from this this game and these people he's met and that he hangs out with. And man, I think I know Jingles watched it, and I didn't know if you watched it, Ian, but I love this movie. I just like big proponent of it.
Yeah, it's I'm okay with you putting this one on the list, because if there was ever like a case to put a documentary on a science fiction fantasy list, this is it. This is pretty much the only time you're going to be able to do that.
Fantasy game involved in it, so I tried to.
And actually, yeah, I did get to see this. I saw this yesterday, and a big component is like they use the animation of World of Warcraft, and they create the story within the game of his life, which I thought was quite fascinating as well. So yeah. I can't believe, where did you find this movie, man? It is quite the movie. I was like, wow. I had no idea what to expect going into it, and it's a pretty touching story.
Yeah. And the disease I looked at, it's Duchenne.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. But yeah, I mean, this is humanity at its best, honestly. I don't know. I think the movie doesn't really move. The documentary doesn't move too much into the talk about this because I think it wants to kind of avoid the debate of whether online communities are real communities and all of that.
Yeah.
I think it pretty firmly stands on they are, and we're not really going to question that. And it is amazing to see what this guy did in 8 years of his life or something like that.
Hmm.
I looked at how many hours he actually spent on World of Warcraft, and it came out to like a full like 10 years nonstop or something
Oh
ridiculous.
my God.
But yeah, what else?
Yeah.
What else did he have? And I think it's important to remember how important online communities are for a lot of people.
I mean, look at
Um,
us. I mean,
yeah,
I thought I saw like a throughway to our Discord, the Legendarium Discord. How many people like you guys I consider friends? Just like actual real friends, and some of you I've met in person, some I haven't, but it's incredible how that there's like legit power in that.
yeah, absolutely. And I think for someone who otherwise would have had just an incredibly limiting life, and his parents admit as much, it's amazing that he was able to find this thing at this time that allowed him to do more.
Right.
And even going so far as to find someone that he loved and wanted to share his time with. So and
Like,
like repairing relationships too.
yeah, I was
Like
just gonna say, like nuts.
yeah.
Dr. Phil. Oh, not
Yeah.
Dr.
Yeah.
Phil.
Yeah.
Um
His father's eulogy at the funeral,
Oh
that
wow.
got me. That was just wow. Yeah.
yeah. Yeah. I started watching this movie at work just because I wanted to put something on, and I was like, well, I need to watch this before the podcast. I got about a half hour and I was like, nope. This is not
Gotta
work
be alone over
material.
there.
I gotta be home. Yep. I gotta be home where I can just bawl my eyes out. So
Yeah. Yeah, that's quite a find, Yeti. Yeah.
Yeah. And just a quick like props. I don't do this often, but props to Netflix. I mean, I bash on them a lot, but they'll put out good stuff. I mean, if they don't market it, of course, but um,
Yeah, they
so
don't, because like I had never when you put this on the show notes, I'm like, what are you talking about?
I think it
What is
was
this movie?
I think it premiered at Sundance last year and then
Yeah, I think you're right.
Netflix bought it and then,
And I
so
heard that they went ahead and they like the animators went ahead and did everything without the permission of, is it Blizzard that does
oh
Blizzard
really?
Entertainment that does
mhm.
World of Warcraft? They did it without any permission and purposely. They're like, and they took a gamble. They're like, we're gonna make this. We're not gonna go to them because we don't want to be restricted by any kind of rules or
Right.
anything they have. And they took it to them after. And
Oh,
then
nice.
and apparently they like the executives were bawling their eyes out and said,
Yeah.
yeah, that's fine. You can
I
do all
dare
this.
you to yeah. Let
So
us use this.
pretty bold. That's a pretty bold strategy.
Yeah. All right. Let's go to Ian's number one. I'm shocked you put it this high, but let's do
Before
it.
we do
Okay.
number ones,
Oh,
You're shocked that I put it this high?
oh wait, to Jingles, you want to do something before we get to number one?
I know it's not a great year, but do any of you have honorable mentions? Because I think even though we've got a good
Yeah.
we've got a good mesh of movies here, but there are some that are not going to be acknowledged this year.
Yeah.
Like Wicked. Sorry, Wicked
What?
fans.
Is that a
Huh?
joke? Do we like Wicked? What's the consensus? I don't know.
I don't. I don't know. I thought it was good. I
Oh,
think it
okay.
at least deserves. I've never seen Wicked before, so I
Yeah.
was I was pleasantly surprised by that one. Terrifier 3. Anyone
Oh,
else
there
watch
we go.
Terrifier 3? That
Nope,
movie.
sorry.
Oh my gosh.
An Ian
That
favorite.
was something. And then also I feel like there were like some actors this year that I thought were big standouts that their movies didn't necessarily make it in, but like Dan Stevens and Catherine Newton I thought had really good years in the
Abigail.
fantasy sci-fi world. Yeah, Abigail was great. Lisa Frankenstein was fun.
Oh, yeah.
In all of its 90s Heather's glory. And then Dan Stevens had some good runs with bigger franchise things that were not good movies, like
Mhm.
Godzilla versus Kong.
Take it easy.
Yeah. But anyway, okay. Yeah. And then one movie I did want to acknowledge just because it would have been on my list last year had I actually watched it before we recorded, but When Evil Lurks. That movie needs to be acknowledged
Incredible.
as one of the best horror movies of the last decade,
Seriously,
hands
I saw
down.
it on your list. I'm like, you cheater! Don't you dare!
Yeah.
That wasn't this year, or else that'd be like
No.
close to the top. Yeah, incredibly disturbing movie. Only for the sickos, I would recommend that movie.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'll do some quick honorable mentions. I like to talk about sick movies. In a Violent Nature is a horror movie, which is like follows like this Michael Myers or Jason type character, but you're in his point of view for most of the movie, and it's very slow because it's kind of him stumbling. You know, they move slow. You know, they're not running at you. So, but one of the gnarliest kills I've ever seen in a movie. Like just gross. Like seriously, like spoilers. Yeah, what did you say? Lisa Frankenstein. I love that movie. That was close to being my number 5, but directed by Robin Williams' daughter,
Mhm.
and that really was like a surprise to me. Just the vibe of that. Catherine Newton's funny. It's essentially a girl who resurrects like a zombie guy who wants to date him. It's kind of silly, but very good. Another one. Well, you said Godzilla King Kong. Come on, classic, very fun. Long Legs with Nicolas Cage.
Oh yeah.
When
I
he talks like this and he goes, I can't do his voice. Yeah, that's like one of the highest grossing movies of, I forget the
Yep.
studio, but
That one really took off.
yeah, great marketing campaign. Cause I'd actually think the marketing's better than the film.
Yeah.
But I still enjoyed it. Is The Beekeeper fantasy sci-fi? Have you guys watched that movie?
Probably. No, not yet.
Oh, you got to watch it. It's actually not bad, but the plot, you guys are gonna laugh where it goes. Like, oh my god. And then just lastly, again, this is cheating, but another documentary is there's a Christopher Reeves documentary about his life, and it's not fantasy, but he played Superman. So, but talk about moving. I mean, that's like really powerful stuff. I mean, you know what he went through and his family, and I recommend that to everyone just to see. You know, also Robin Williams, MVP of that stuff. So
I have no honorable mentions.
what a brutal year.
Weird. Dang.
What was your number 1 worst movie? Give us a tease.
Oh, Argyle takes that one.
Argyle?
That was
Do you actually
horrid.
watch Argyle?
Yeah.
Oh wow.
Yeah. I wish I
Good
didn't.
man.
Yeah. But Godzilla versus Kong was also pretty bad.
Yeah, I remember that was on
Sorry,
there.
man. I don't
How
know.
dare you?
And I like the other ones quite a bit, but that one was no.
Godzilla does a WWE move on
Yeah.
Kong.
Gives him the
Suplex
elbow.
someone. All right.
Yeah.
Let's get back to the good stuff. All right, all our top picks. Ian, you can start off.
All right, well, let's go to Dune Part 2 is my number 1 sci-fi fantasy movie of the year. I obviously loved the first Dune, loved it, and I was very excited for this one, and it lived up to expectations. And anybody who says differently is just so wrong.
Can we find a mute button for like the next 5 minutes?
Yeah, so I thought that Dune Part 2 really came into its own. I thought that Timothée Chalamet kind of took over the movie in a way that I don't feel that he did in the first one. So he kind of grew to be the leader that he's supposed to be, just like his character in the film. I thought that the rest of the cast was stunning. The spectacle was fantastic. I thought that Villeneuve did an amazing job kind of presenting new aspects of this world that we didn't see in the first one, or blowing them up to be pretty huge and massive. It was a great conclusion to what was set up before. And whether we get the third one or not, I'm happy. Like if they don't actually end up making that third movie, I'm okay with that. I think that this is a great film to end it on. If they do make a third movie, cool. You know, the only apprehension I have is that I've read the books and I know that the second book that the third movie is based on is lesser, but I also think that it's a great opportunity to wrap up the story too. So if they do it, excellent.
I'd also be fine if they stopped at 2 movies.
Yeah, I too would be fine if they stopped at 2 movies. Just because I do think a lot of what the second book is supposed to be kind of serves as a coda for the first book to begin with. Just to clarify some things, because Frank Herbert kind of infamously, people misread the book, and he was really not happy about that. So he made Messiah as kind of a way to clear up some things that apparently were not evident. And so I don't think I necessarily need the third movie, but I will welcome it. I'm not going to be totally opposed. I think back when I watched this for the first time, I was very much in the camp of this is probably the best adaptation we have seen since Lord of the Rings. And a year down the road, I think that is still true. I think Villeneuve knew the assignment. He knew Herbert's books very well enough to at least navigate all of the aspects of them, finding what works, what doesn't work, adapting and changing what he needed to make sure things were clear. And I think he did it. And yeah, he did it.
Yeah, I agree with the adaptation part. I find myself incredibly lucky that like some of my absolute favorite books in the science fiction fantasy, which are just some of my favorite books, have gotten excellent adaptations. Like Lord of the Rings got excellent adaptations. Game of Thrones are some of my favorite books, and I love that series. And then Dune
Wheel of
is one of my
Time.
favorite books as well.
Yeah.
I don't put Wheel of Time at the same level as these three though. So it's
Yeah.
yeah.
Well, and that's what
I'm very happy.
Game of Thrones even then, and that's a TV format. I mean,
Yeah.
Denny brought it back to movie format,
Right.
which is impressive because there's a lot of reasons to make Dune a TV series over a movie, I think.
Well, they did.
If-
right.
yeah, they did. I'm being a little facetious. That the series was fine, but it comes from lesser work, and you can tell.
Well,
And because we are on a book podcast, I guess I can probably talk about something a little bit more esoteric. I am disappointed that they did not have Aaliyah in this movie. I will say that I was interested to see what Villeneuve was going to do with her character, and as he decided not to have her, which was a little disappointing. But
who is she in the story?
Yeah.
Like what?
Paul's sister. But in the
She
book,
was in
she's yeah, but not in the same way that the book. Like in the book, she's like a 5-year-old, all-knowing 5-year-old, which is like, okay,
Yeah.
what's he gonna do with that? And I kind of still am a little disappointed that we didn't get his take on her.
Yeah, and this being the safest space probably to talk spoilers, I think I wanted to see Aaliyah. At the same time, I totally understand and appreciate that maybe we didn't go that route.
Yeah,
because I don't know how much I would have. I don't know how much I would have loved to see a 5-year-old CG or otherwise running around killing people. But
a little off-putting, but
yeah.
Well, I want to preface this and say this is a hot take. I like the movie. The movie is Dune 2 is good, and I'll stand.
But not enough. You don't like it enough.
I know. I know this is crazy. People get angry that I like the movie, but I do like it. Yeah, I think sometimes we get into those childish things where I hear, like Jingle said, it's like Lord of the Rings, and I compare it to that, like the adaptation wise. And to me, like Lord of the Rings, I watched that and I wanted to immediately get into the books and I wanted to get more into that world. Whereas Dune, for me, I didn't have that effect really. I was like, oh, those are cool movies, but I don't really have a sense to rewatch them ever again. And I think I've said this before on the Discord and been publicly shamed, but I feel like the people who read the books are like kind of carrying the water for this movie sometimes because they really nailed the adaptation. I feel the same way about the Wicked people. We're like, oh, it's the best movie ever. I'm like, well, you just love Wicked, and they did a good job adapting it to the screen. Whereas someone who I've never read the books, don't know a lick about Dune, and just watching the films, don't know anything about Paul other than Timmy Chalamet, and to him in the second movie where he's like, everyone's saying he's like this great leader and he becomes more bad boy. I'm just like, I just still see this dude in skinny jeans. like the scene where he like gets around all these people giving a speech. Like that's the scene of the year. I'm like, is it? I mean, I don't know. I thought it was a little cringe, but again, it's like, it's not bad. I mean, Denny's so talented that like, it looks amazing. Like I still have the visual of those guys floating up in their little rocket things in the opening kind of sequence. Like that was like incredible. That's one of the sequences of the year, just visually. But it's hard, and like everyone loves Zendaya in this movie, but I just like compare her to challengers. I'm like, well, that's a performance. Like this, I feel like she's doing the best with what she has, but it's just, I don't know, a little muted. So it was good, but it's like weird. It's a lot of these big movies that become successful. But I remember someone was saying, I keep bringing up Top Gun Maverick, that it's it's kind of forgettable. Like it's like easily digestible and you kind of don't remember it. And that's how I feel about Dune and Dune 2. It's not bad. It's a great big budget movie, and I'm always going to push for them to make movies like that, this like that are such high quality and that people love and go to the box office. But I do think there's some fanboying it, and Denis fanboying. I think he's gotten to a level where he's like getting close to the Nolan thing where it's like, well, he's the best. But and I think I'm stubborn. I'd rather him go back to something like Arrival. Well, frankly, or Blade Runner 2049. I guess that was a remake too, or a sequel. So, yeah, I mean, I think I'm a little facetious and I play up my anti-Dune persona a little bit, but
Yeah, I saw it floated. I saw it floating in your number 5 spot for a little bit there.
no, he put it.
Oh, did he really?
Ian wrote it in there. That's why.
Oh, never mind.
He edited. I shouldn't have given editing powers. Yeah, and like I think it's funny though because when it came out, it had such like Oscar contentions. They're like, oh, this is clearly the best movie of the year. And the Oscar season's so long where it's like now it's like nothing. Like Wicked overtook it for all the below the line, a lot of the below the line stuff. People started saying, well, it'll get its due in the third movie. But then people who've read the books are like, well, that third movie's based on some weird stuff, like be a lot for Oscar voters. So it's kind of in this, I don't know if it's going to get the Return of the King, ovation in a sense. But I think they'll make the third movie, and I'll watch it.
Well, the first one did pretty good at the Oscars anyway, so it'll be fine.
Yeah,
I'll be fine. Yeah. I do think they seem to always be in discussion with each other. Maybe because we forced the issue, but Lord of the Rings and Dune, kind of being the iconic fantasy and sci-fi stories of that era, that have grown with all of us, and are things we love deeply. They approach things so differently.
Yeah.
Like Lord of the Rings is just such an optimistic
Right. Yeah.
take of the world, and Dune is such a cynical one.
Yeah.
And I think that can be a hard thing to adjust to, if you go in, like, especially if someone like me is like, this is the best adaptation since the Lord of the Rings. That could be a very false impression on what you think you're going to come up through.
I was thinking that too. They're so thematically different. I mean, it's so much hope, or the fight for hope in the Lord of the Rings, where this one is like clear corruption of Paul,
Yeah.
So it's a great pick. Everyone expected it, Ian.
Yeah, I know.
Hey.
What can I say?
Hey,
I will say, because I have this week on my podcast, we're doing our top 10 of the year list, and I will say this actually isn't my number 1 of the year. It's my number 1 sci-fi fantasy, but it's not. So
okay,
for you.
Very interesting.
Did you get to see The Brutalist already?
I know. Brutalist. I'm trying to make a joke. What movie? Trap, obviously, was number 1.
Trap. Yeah. Heretic. Ian seems like a heretic guy.
All right. Let's Jingles, you can talk about your number 1 and Ian's number 2. Ian can join you, but we'll let you explain why you chose your number 1.
All right, cool. Yeah. This is where I break from the theme of my list of trying to find completely original works, because my number 1 was either going to be Dune or it was going to be Nosferatu. And I think maybe it's a little bit of recency bias, but Nosferatu takes that for me. Because Robert Eggers just kills it. This movie is truly a piece of art in my mind. If you don't know what Nosferatu is about, I think you've been living under a rock, but it's Dracula. It's the story of Dracula told a little differently to avoid copyright infringement. So it's about a vampire that is looking to... Well, actually, I think they do change the story a little bit. Lily Rose Depp plays Mina Harker. I can't remember what the names are outside of the Dracula context, but she as a child is desperate for love, and she puts her feelings out into the ether, and the thing that answers back is Count Orlok, a vampire from Transylvania. And this movie follows some years later, and just kind of the outcome of him wanting to fulfill his promise to her of um, uh, being with her and their love. It's a weird premise for me to describe it that way, but that is kind of at the core of what this is. And then just the absolute evil that Orlok brings to Germany, including the plague. This is a beautiful movie. I think Eggers does an amazing job, like with his long takes that have kind of become his signature.
Yeah.
You start with like just these amazing shots of pitch black, and then it in one shot turns into this grayscale that shows Lily Rose Depp being one way, and then it continues, and you kind of get to see her just devolve into this just absolutely horrified expression. And he does that over and over and over in this movie. He changes the color palette of the movie the entire time to represent different emotions and different feelings, which also kind of match it. I rewatched the original Nosferatu after this, and he's actually using some of the shading that was used on the cells in that. And I don't know, just great. Lily Rose Depp is not an actress I've ever thought highly of. She hasn't really done anything to think highly about, but dang, does she get a performance in here? Sorry.
What about
Lily.
Tusk? Kevin Smith Tusk.
I don't even remember her in that movie. I don't know. I do remember her in Yoga Hosers though.
That's what I'm thinking of. Sorry.
But you know, she's fine, I guess, in that. However you might feel about Yoga Hosers. Yeah, but she does an amazing job. Nicholas Hoult puts in an amazing performance. I've never seen someone so scared on screen before as Nicholas Hoult when he's in Orlok's castle. Bill Skarsgård goes all out. If you hadn't told me Bill Skarsgård was Orlok, I would have never guessed it, because how could you? He fully embraces that role. And yeah, I don't know. It's a very classic story, and it's done very well.
Ian, I saw you said it was unnerving in your review.
I thought it very unnerving. Like the way that sequence in his castle is unreal. Like it's so fantastic how he films that. The way that Eggers plays with like space, right? Like where the characters are in relation to each other and how that can suddenly switch, and you're like, I thought you were over there, but now you're over here. And the distance between things keeps changing, and it starts off with that we were talking about this before the podcast, the horse carriage that just like comes and picks him up and has nobody in it, and when that door of the carriage just opens by itself, you're like, oh, what? Like, get out of there. Go away, run away. He won me over with that for sure. And then the whole movie's got that kind of tone of just creepiness, and yeah, it's very unnerving. Very well made movie.
Yeah, I feel like people have been saying that it's like a very disturbing movie visually. I don't know if I necessarily agree. The Substance is on my list. I saw much worse this year. But there are some really like horrifying things. I still am trying to figure out how they did the pigeon scene.
Yeah.
Well, he like,
yes.
I thought, yeah. Oh, I had my hands in my hands over my eyes, but I thought he dipped down the pigeon under the screen and then came back up, but maybe I missed it. Yeah.
No, he goes full on mouth and then off it goes.
Yeah, violent. I actually wish, like, one of my complaints about the movie is I wish it leaned more into that, like either grosser or more violent or scarier than it was. I know, I agree. It had the feel of it was the atmosphere was, he nailed that. Like it was like a haunting atmosphere, but either go more in that direction or more into maybe like a romantic direction, if that makes sense, with Holt and Lily Rose Depp's character. I just think that's one of his weaknesses as a director, is like there's no emotion to his movies. I don't think he focuses on that. Like Northman, The Witch, maybe The Lighthouse, you could say. But he just focuses so much on the atmosphere or the historical accuracies that sometimes, like, I didn't have a connection at the end when the ending happens. I wasn't crying. I didn't care. I was like, that's cool. I mean, visually it was amazing. A great visual at the end there. But I think sometimes he's missing on those emotional moments. But overall, yeah, I saw it last night with my girlfriend, and we were like, she was scared senseless, and I also was scared. Since just the jump scares. I mean, we were talking before, but like he does so well with these jump scares where Orlok's face just pops up in out of nowhere or something like that, and they always get me. But yeah, I mean, it's great. Edgar's, yeah, I get it. He has a hive of his own, so I don't want to bemoan him too much. But I love that he's making movies like this. You know, like who else is going to get money to do something updated for this, you know, this era and make it feel and take the time to put put the work in to make it look like this. I thought is great. Yeah, Lily Rose Depp, her physical performance is gross. I mean, some of the stuff she's doing with her face is amazing. Who knew that because it was supposed to be Anya Taylor-Joy is originally who he, you know, Eggers wanted, and you know, she dropped out. So, but
Yeah, and I'm ultimately I'm kind of happy that happened. Like I
yeah,
think we know Anya Taylor-Joy's got the stuff to do this. I don't think that's up for debate much, but um, I, she would feel misplaced. I think in this movie in
I think
some
I agree with you.
capacities. Yeah.
Yep.
So yeah, I'm glad to see because I just pushing back on the emotions bit a little bit, and I know this isn't necessarily what you're talking about, but the scene between Lily Rose and Nicholas Holt when they're arguing with each other, um, it's near the end of the movie. It leads into the only sex scene of the movie.
yeah,
But that entire scene, you know, is done in these long takes where you
mm.
see her just run the gamut of different emotions. And not necessarily anything long term or makes you, you know, feel anything for these characters, but you know, I think she does do some really impressive work there, and I think Nicholas Holt does as well. Just being like utterly confused about
Yeah,
what's happening. So
yeah. No, you're right. The
yeah.
performances, their emotions are great. Even Bill Skarsgård is, you know, when Orlok loses his cool sometimes or whatever. Yeah, definitely Lily Rose Depp. I mean, she goes through it. I mean, she's playing like a manic person essentially throughout it. But yeah, it was. I liked Willem Dafoe as like the side, you know, crazy. I don't know the guy of the occult just coming in halfway through the movie. I'm like, oh, now we're talking. Now we're kicking it into second gear.
Yeah.
So yeah, it was good. I mean, I think people are. It's doing great at the box office, and I'm you know thrilled. I don't want stuff like this to bomb. You know.
Yeah. Yeah. It's kind of nice to see things that where proper care is taken into like what it's going to look like and things like that. It's nice to see people acknowledge that.
Solid number one. Unfortunately, none of them are any match for my number one. So I chose the Wild Robot for my number one. Yes, very much like Dune 2 and Nosferatu. And it's an animated movie. I think it came out from DreamWorks, which, you know, one of the reasons I really love this movie is that it didn't, I don't know, I feel like DreamWorks kind of has not a stink to it, but they have that stupid new opening now where it's like Shrek and I don't know,
Right.
some of their mid-tier movies as if we're supposed to think they're like Disney classics or anything like that. But it was directed by Chris Sanders, who has directed How to Train Your Dragon and my sister's favorite Disney movie, Lilo and Stitch. So he knows what he's doing. But essentially, it's takes place in like a future where robots are like our Alexa servants, but like butlers or something. They get matched up with people. You can order them, and this one goes off course and goes on an island, and with just animals, and doesn't really have a purpose because there's no human to like latch onto it, so it latches on eventually to a small human or not human, a small duck called Brightbill, and yeah, I cried 5 times during this movie. I don't know. I'm not going to argue it's the best movie that came out this year, but the animation's
You
beautiful.
are arguing that.
Yeah, I am. Sorry.
Aren't you arguing it? Isn't that what we're doing here?
That's actually exactly why we're here.
Yeah, sorry. All right, I'm back. I am arguing it. But it's the animation's amazing, especially for a DreamWorks movie. The voice cast is really fun. Lupita Nyong'o again shows up here, and you got Pedro Pascal, Bill Nighy. So Matt Berry, if you like the that vampire TV show, What We Do in the Shadows. But essentially, it's just like it's a story of one like motherhood, and we've all had mothers, and that always gets me emotional, just seeing how hard it is, how on the mothers, just seeing yourself in this stupid little duck who takes things for granted with your moms, but also for me, like the step parents, which I have a stepdaughter, so it really spoke to me in that regard, just seeing someone that is not biologically your own, but grow and turn into something bigger or better, and it's what you get out of that in your life, and then moving on past that once they get older and having to see that they're not your little young ducks anymore. Just again, I was just I was losing it through multiple times. So that's essentially why I got stuck on there. But it's fun. Did you guys see this
Mhm.
year? I'm hoping it wins Best
Yeah.
Animated Feature in the Oscars, but it's like a loaded Best Animated year. I don't know if you guys kept up, but there's like 5 legit like strong ones.
Yeah. What would this be in contention with? Probably.
And so Inside Out,
Yeah.
this Memories of a Snail, which is like stop
Oh,
motion
that's
movie.
right.
It's
Yeah.
like incredible. That's also one of my favorite
That's
movies of the
from
year. The guy who did Mary Max and stuff.
Mary Max. Yeah.
Yep. And then this animated movie, I still haven't seen it yet, called Flow, which it's just about a cat that kind of gets lost a little bit,
Yeah,
but
I've heard good
there's
things.
there's no speaking, and it's all just animal noises they do, and they like
Okay.
move like animals. Like this movie, the animals kind of more humanistic, when they're moving, obviously talking, but so Flow's getting a lot of buzz too. So it's kind of in a jam-packed, and Inside Out too, obviously, because it made the most money. So I'm hoping it gets recognition, but if not, everyone should check it out. I think it's like a tier above all the other DreamWorks stuff. Even Puss in Boots: The Last Wish, which I think I was listening to Ian's podcast, and there was like you guys had a funny anecdote about that. Had me laughing. One of Daniel's friends like said, "Hey, did you see that movie yet?" And he's like, "Out of all the movies,
That's the one.
it is good."
Yeah. I haven't seen this yet, but I really want to. Like, it just was one of those that came out at a time where I was too busy, like in the theaters, I couldn't go see it. And then I'm going to. I just haven't had a chance. I was actually hoping to last night to rent it last night. Then we got home too late, so it didn't happen. Sorry, man.
Oh, you saw the Netflix documentary. That's good enough.
That's right.
Yeah. It was the last movie on the list that I needed to watch before we did this, so I watched it on Friday. I really enjoyed it. It's a very sweet movie. I did not cry. I'm sorry, but I understand why you might have. It's very touching. I do enjoy the animation. I thought like the first 20 minutes, maybe this is me getting old or something, but I was just this is moving too fast. I don't know if I can keep up with this.
It is a very hectic beginning too. I know what you're talking about. Like when she crash
Yeah.
lands, and I thought the same thing.
But eventually it slowed down, and I found it very good. A very touching movie.
Yeah, and it's based off like best-selling books. Like so, I think they'll make. Hopefully, or I don't know. I don't really care if they make more or not because I thought it ended on a nice note. But
Yeah,
wouldn't be
and
surprised.
it was in theaters for a while, so I got to imagine it was making some money.
Yeah.
I'm still confused. I thought DreamWorks was dead, but they still keep coming out with things here and there. So I don't. Yeah. Well, who knows? Maybe their efforts are going to change over now that the live action
Well, they
How to
got
Train Your Dragon's coming out.
and they got the Aren't they doing the live action? Yeah, right.
Well, I mean,
So-
they're no longer the bottom of animation studios anymore because we have Illumination Studios now,
Oh, that's right.
which is
We'll
horrid.
just put out two Minion movies every year. You'll be fine.
Yeah.
And now, they're gonna have the Nintendo verse, I'm sure now, the Mario movies and
Oh yeah, that
Oh,
was
yeah.
theirs,
Oh, I
wasn't it?
forgot they did Mario. Yeah, that was theirs.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and DreamWorks now has like The Bad Guys. I think is one of their things. Those movies. But they're a low tier. They're not Minions, but they're not like Pixar, Disney quality. So, but I think this is the first one where it's like, oh, this is like I think reached that level a little bit. But
I mean, I think one of the greatest things that can ever come out of animation is that you use different types of animation, and this movie does that. Like, it's familiar, but it's not like everything else DreamWorks does, which I appreciate. And yeah, was continuing to see that creativity flow through. their work is good.
There you go. All right, boys. We somehow did it again. I don't know. Next year, obviously, we're all going to have the, I was going to say Thunderbolt. Yeah, Thunderbolts, right? That's that Marvel movie.
Yeah.
Or Civil War, New Soldier.
Captain America.
Oh, Captain America. That's what I don't know. I'm losing it.
After its 50 retakes, I think they've done now at this point. They've gone to the drawing board a couple different times with that one. I'm sure it's going to be a mess. Yeah. Fantastic Four does look great, though.
Yeah,
I'm excited for that one.
Even the Superman trailer got me hyped up. I'm like, oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Before we leave, should we do one non-sci-fi fantasy movie you want to plug that everyone should watch? I'll throw you on the spot.
Dang.
I have one ready. I'll go first. I'm going to pick, I mean, there's a couple as my favorites, but Sean Black Diamond on the Discord told me about this movie. It's called Look Back, and it's an Amazon movie, kind of in the style. It's based on a manga, and it's on Amazon Prime now. It's only like 80 minutes, and it's based on two kids who are in elementary school or something that's, are really good artists, and they kind of compete with each other. And all I'll say is that they grow up together and become like a writing team, like one draws, one writes, and they create a best-selling artwork, but like manga themselves. But the visuals in this is amazing. There's a sequence in the rain that with the music, it's one of my favorite scores of the year, probably top 5, that like, there's nothing sad about it, but just got me emotional. Like, there's nothing like a big moment. It's just the way it was filmed and the music. And I recommend everyone watch it. Look Back. And it's, 80 minutes.
Well, I'm going to go with one we already kind of talked about, which is Hundreds of Beavers. I think that is a very fun movie that is very different than everything else. And I think that people should check it out. It's a lot of fun.
I'm going to watch it.
It's goofy, but it's clever. Like, it's the way that they set things up is very clever. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I really want to watch that. That's on the list. I'm going to cheat a little bit because one of them is still a genre movie. So my first one is going to be Anora. I think everyone should watch Anora. I think
Oscar frontrunner.
Yeah, high contender for me.
Maybe not with your grandma though.
No, don't watch it with any family that you're timid with sex around. But it's a great movie. I really enjoyed myself in that movie. And then the other movie is Strange Darling. It's a horror movie that's told in I'm not going to say anything.
Yeah.
But
have you seen this yet, Ian?
No, I haven't. I've heard quite a bit about it. I just haven't seen it yet.
It's definitely one of my favorite of the year. I tried to put it on this list. It's not. I wouldn't say it's hard. I mean, it's
hard to,
because I think you could just to say like Ian could watch it. I mean, it's not.
Yeah, I don't think you're gonna have any trouble with it.
But it's great. I mean, talk about some great performances. This was like my of the year where I was shocked. I was like, what is never heard of it, and it came out and just made the rounds on film Twitter and stuff.
Yes, absolutely. And it's one night stand gone awry. There we go.
Perfect. Yeah. All right, Ian. And why don't you plug your podcast or anything you want before we get out of here?
Sure. Yeah. So I have a podcast called Cinema in Seconds where we take like small parts of movies and talk about them and why they work. And we've got different themes every week of what movies we talk about. We just did an episode on our first time watches of 2024. So kind of matches with this, but those are like old movies that we saw for the first time. And then in a couple days, we're going to record our top movies of the year, just kind of like this one, but opened up to all the movies. So I'll have my full top 10 on that one. And a couple of the movies we talked about here will also be talked about there. So here we go.
Twisters.
Yeah, I was going to say the same thing. Twisters, yeah, obviously. Well, I look forward to your episode about WWE wrestlers turned actors.
Oh yeah, we'll get right on that one.
All right. We've been doing this enough. Thank you for Craig and everyone for letting us do this. Our song, thank you to Horizon Braves for starting it. Our song is Galactic Damages by Jingle Punks. Did I see that?
Got it. Yep, you got it.
Killing it. And for Jingalls and Ian, myself, Yettibeats, thanks for listening.
Adios.
I was telling Ian, like, the only reference I had for that movie was Dracula by Coppola.
Oh, sure.
I was like, oh, this is just like that. And like I whispered to Emma, like, yeah, don't worry. Like, in the middle of the movie, he gets like good looking. He tries to, attract this woman, and I was like, and it never happened. He's just gross.
He's gross the whole time.